This episode is brought to you by Pentester Academy.com, the leader in online cybersecurity education. Also brought to you by Hacker Arsenal, artillery for cyber warriors. Be sure to check out our latest attack defense gadgets on hackerarsenal.com. Hey everyone, I'm sitting down here with Craig Smith today. Thank you so much for joining us, Craig.
No, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about what you do.
So I'm the research director of transportation security at Rapid7. So that means I do planes, trains, spaceships, satellite systems, maritime equipment, kind of the IoT that's in big moving parts. And that's my main focus at Rapid7 right now.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, what made you interested in the cybersecurity field? What made you want to get started in it?
Well, let's see. Well, I've been doing it for a long time. Did a lot of penetration testing, then spent a lot of time in reverse engineering. Removing DRM was something I spent a decent amount of time on, so I'm not a big fan of DRM, and managed to get a job actually taking DRM off of things, which was quite nice. And then I kind of got into just car hacking, just modifying my own car. I decided that I had a vehicle where I was taking a commute from Cincinnati to Dayton every day, and it's a 2-hour commute with traffic, and so I bought a hybrid vehicle. And this hybrid vehicle had a nice double-din display, which is like a bigger display. Hadn't had one of these before. I had a junker prior to that. And I was like, oh, wow, that's like a computer in my car. That's the first time it really clicked. And I didn't need the maps or anything. So I thought, it'd be really cool is if I just reverse engineered that and figured out how to put music videos on it. It would be awesome, right? But not responsible or mature or anything, but whatever, probably wasn't even legal, but I thought that would be a cool project, right? Why not? It's my car. So I went through that process of doing that, and it was like, that was fun. Figured out how to, reverse it and get code running on it. And so I just published how I did that. And that got the attention of a group that was looking at security in vehicles. And they're like, you're in security and you reverse engineer the car. Like, why don't you put those two together? Makes sense. So I started looking more into that and working with those groups. And there wasn't a lot of research on that. There wasn't a lot of public stuff there. So I wrote a book called The Car Hacker's Handbook that picked up a lot of attention with that, and just kind of became my thing accidentally, where I started just doing more and more engagements that relate to cars because of that, and that's now got me doing all kinds of moving things because of that. So that's where I'm at now and how I got there.
Nice. Okay, so now I have to ask, what do you think about all the Teslas hitting the road? Because now, almost the average person has one. What do you think about that? And what's your concern, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the cab right over here was a Tesla. No. Yeah, there was an official cab that was a Tesla.
I've never seen that.
Yeah, I saw it at the airport, and I was like, I'm taking that. That sounds amazing, and you pay for it. But, yeah.
Are you concerned now, since more and more people are going to start to have cars like that? Do you see that as a cybersecurity threat or something, or?
So, it's interesting, and it's a complicated subject, because we have a lot of luxury vehicles, and I'm not going to pick on anyone in particular, but a lot of luxury vehicles have capabilities already, and we call them assisted driving. So they're not self-driving yet. They just kind of assist you with changing lanes, or maybe just, stopping for you, or things of that nature. Tesla's what they call level 3, which means it can also do some self-driving capabilities on the highway, but for the most part, the human still is there to take over, and they're doing the most of the driving. And we're moving closer to what's called a level 5 self-driving, where humans can't drive it. So the stage we're in now is the assisted driving stage. And the assisted driving stage is, that one's a little bit complicated in that we have different variations of what that means. Plus, we're integrating old components that are really not aware of such things, and then some newer sensor-based components. And these sensor-based components typically are only see something react. Like, I saw an object, I stopped. Those kinds of things. And from an attacker perspective, that's just one thing you could target, right? So if you can get that one piece to fail, and then you can basically have that action happen. Or there's only one barrier of entry, like maybe the infotainment center. Once you're in the infotainment center, you're basically internal to the car, and that's a trusted environment. Strangely, when you get to a self-driving world, because they use multiple different sensors to kind of figure things out, they're going to look at an object, and it won't just be one sensor saying, oh, there's an object there. It's also going to use a camera, maybe infrared. Is it a human object? Is it, if it's a biomatter, do I have to worry about this thing? Or is it just a pile of leaves maybe on the ground? Like, what is that thing really to me? And then because it doesn't actually use one sensor, it basically doesn't trust the other sensors. And that creates a non-trusted environment within the car, which is different than we currently do today. So right now, a hacker gets in one spot, it's trusted, and it's all game over. In that world, when you don't trust your own sensors, it's way harder. I can't just fake a sensor. I have to fake like all the sensors. It's like faking the 5 senses of a human, And so I think we're actually going to transition to a safer area. It's actually harder to hack. And it's not really because we're doing the mantra of do more security. It's just because the nature of that beast has to be more intelligent. So something simple as even a kid going up and slapping tape over a sensor isn't going to have that much effect, which it does today. I can't really answer that yes or no on any particular thing because it's complicated.
And what's your guess? In 100 years from now, do you think that we're going to be in a level 5 kind of world where everything is self-driving, or like what's your guess if you had to see into the future? What do you think?
I definitely think we're going to go self-driving, and I don't think it's going to take all that long. We're working on it now, and it's not quite there, but there's a lot of effort being done. I think most people are now to the stage where they feel that with self-driving vehicles, we're going to have less deaths than we have of humans driving, and even people who are afraid of self-driving still feel that's the case, which is really interesting. I think this is the first time I can really think of where as a whole, people are like, I'm terrified of this concept, but we really need her or we're going to die. Like, that's a really odd
It's weird.
thing to say, right? Yeah, who's terrified of something that's going to save our lives? But that seems to be the consensus at this moment. So I really think it's just going to take getting some things that hopefully work well out there and getting people comfortable with it. And I think it'll just fall over. I think in the United States, we have around 33,000 people die a year on the highway. So really, that's where the bar is at. It's kind of low. So you just have to beat that. So I don't think it'll take too long.
And you would agree, would you think it's human error, like for most of the accidents, would you say?
Yeah, typically. I mean, you can still have your software bugs and things like that could cause an accident. You can have mechanical failures cause an accident. Sleep deprivation, though, is something that causes a lot of them. So drinking and driving, those kinds of things. And just, mistakes, people not paying attention, that kind of stuff. And so a lot of those just go away. And what's going to be interesting is how does it affect the city? Because self-driving cars can actually cause worse traffic than we currently have. Yeah, because you can have a lot more cars could be on the road. They can do things where instead of parking a car, you can just have it circle till you're done. Things of that nature.
Just blew my mind, I'm sorry.
Right. So, if you're doing something like that, it's going to take up space. And because you don't really care if you're getting there necessarily faster or not, if you're working the car, you can have it take side roads or whatever, so all the arteries can also fill up. There's a lot of very odd things that can happen in our projections, so we're going to have to redesign cities differently. We'll probably, and if I'm just using my mystical ball here, we'll probably go to more of a rental model for cars. We're not necessarily going to buy a car. You're just going to have a car come get you and go take you somewhere to kind of limit how many cars are on the road, and have a bunch of personal cars just shooting off doing things.
That sounds better for my wallet anyways, honestly. I don't really like paying my insurance, so...
Yeah, insurance is another interesting area. Like, we'll see what happens with insurance as who's at fault when self-driving cars run into each other. Right. So I don't know how that's going to play out yet.
We'll see. And so now I know you just did a talk today as well. You just finished up. Thank you for sitting down with us after that. Will you tell me just a little bit about what you spoke about today?
Sure. So the talk was on an addition to Metasploit. So that's the penetration testing framework. And so I made a piece for that called the Harbour Bridge. And it allows, so Metasploit's already kind of good at doing Ethernet and servers and all that kind of hacking. The Harbour Bridge allows it to expand beyond Ethernet. So you can do things like car hacking. You can do things like wireless hacking and things that aren't Ethernet based. Talk directly even to custom hardware you built. So you could build something from Arduino to go do whatever, and then have Metasploit interact with that. So the nice thing about that is you get standardized kind of testing. So like a person will be able to do things like if you were to run right now, if you were to run a test on something, it's usually whatever the skill set of that particular hardware engineer might be. And they may even do it differently from one device to another. And so as we get to more of a standard with things, you can then write up tests that just anybody can run. Even if you are somebody who's going to do some low-level stuff, at least you have a baseline. And currently today, we don't have that. So this is to kind of solve that problem.
Nice. Okay. So just out of curiosity, what does a typical day look like for you? Like at work, a typical day? Probably no such thing, but as typical as it could be, I guess. What does a normal day look like for you?
It's all over the place. I mean, a lot of times I'm traveling either to, client sites or to conferences, organizing, certain we have a transportation task force where we're kind of looking at different pieces. We have to kind of manage not only what, customers are currently asking for, but what they're going to maybe need later and kind of get some research kind of preempted. So you have your tools ready for things. You have things that, so when the client does say like, hey, we have this, spaceship thing we want you to work on. You have something for that. You have some kind of answer. It may not have like their equipment, but you've been able to acquire enough stuff together that you're ready for it and you're ready to do some things. So a lot of it's prep work for that and future research stuff.
Okay, nice. So at least a base framework to work with, essentially.
Yeah, as best you can. Yeah. And some things are just hard to work on. If you want to work on a cruise ship, it's not like that you can just grab a cruise ship, and they're usually in use, so those kinds of things. Other things are, a vehicle is a lot easier. You can go to a junkyard, you can pull the parts and work on it, use your own car. But yeah, certain other bigger pieces of equipment, you have to be a lot more creative on building out your tool set and your capabilities on.
Okay. And now just given your years of experience in the field, what do you think is one of the biggest growing threats, in the cybersecurity community today, or something that, scares you or concerns you?
There's so many words.
Oh God, no.
Well, being in security, like our job is to be just completely paranoid at all times. Yeah. Right now it's been focused on the hardware. So, the Internet of Things has just been a mess. So we've been focused a lot on that. Ransomware, of course, has really picked up, and as ransomware starts moving to hardware, that's of course terrifying as well. It's definitely one thing to see, your workstation locked up. It's a whole other thing if your elevator locks up or, something worse. And I don't want to speculate and fearmonger on it. But these are the things, of course, we prepare for, right? And these are the things we look at and we're always focusing on. So that's kind of an area that I've been spending a lot of my time on trying to prepare and get the industry kind of ready for, especially in the area of transportation. Like what does that look like and how do you deal with that?
And what do you think companies can do to better work on, stuff like that, so it's not more such a, after the fact kind of a situation and fixing it, but preventing it for the future?
Well, yeah, there's a lot, of course, you can do. A lot of it's just awareness. A lot of these companies, especially when it comes to hardware, they don't come from a security background. They don't if they have a hardware in their company, like maybe they build custom hardware, their security team typically isn't involved with the hardware. That's engineering, and they do their own thing, and they make a product, and the security maybe gets involved with it. Getting them involved much earlier on is something like right now I see at Rapid7, we're at a stage where we're getting hired to review finished hardware products. And we'll do that and we'll find issues and vulnerabilities with them, but sometimes these vulnerabilities are based in the architecture of the board, like the way the board was designed. And unless you're going to do a recall, you're not going to fix it. And so then you have to really kind of weigh in issues and whatnot. And you're looking at unfixable bugs in that case for that particular system. And what really needs to happen, I think we're going to get there, but we're not there yet, is we need to work more with the engineers during the prototyping stage. And so build the threat models out as they're working on devices, as they're building out new ones, and they're like, oh, I think I have this one. Because engineers are great at solving problems if they know about the problems. And because they're not working with the security team at that level, just even have security people kind of being part of that process with like, oh, well, if we do find a bug, like, do we have a full way of updating this? Like, what's the easiest way to fix it? Or what if somebody does this random thing? And engineers always respond, why would somebody do that? Hackers do that just for fun, right? And so it's something that once they know that some crazy person would do that, they're pretty good at making solutions for it. They just usually don't know about the problem. So just kind of getting early on in that development process, so you don't get all the way down the road and you get a device that you can't fix. At least have a fixable device at the end. And you've thought about some of these weird circumstances that hackers will do.
So basically worst case scenarios and better integration than when they're building the product in the first place, pretty much.
Yeah, it's just too late with a lot of these things. And a lot of things just take years. I mean, automotive components take 5 years from design to it actually comes out. And so there's a lot of things that change even in our world in that time period. We'll find out that there's a new like heartbleed bug or something like that. And, we didn't know that 5 years ago. And so we said, oh, use SSL. Well, they did. And now there's this issue. And now you have to explain like, well, this is why that's a problem. Yeah. So, but if you've done the proper threat modeling in the hardware, then you can say, well, that's why we have the update. And this is why we can push down patches,
We'll see. Hopefully we'll get there then one day. Hopefully sooner rather than later, at least.
Yeah, that's the plan. Fix the architecture type stuff. I mean, a lot of it's just the way we've thought about things throughout the past and getting that fixed up. And we've seen it throughout the industry. And some industries are just farther along than others.
Yeah. Well, Craig, thank you so much for sitting down with us today. That was really insightful. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's great talking to you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
This episode was brought to you by Pentester Academy, the leader in online cybersecurity education. Also brought to you by Hacker Arsenal, artillery for cyber warriors. Visit us on hackerarsenal.com to check out our latest attack defense gadgets.